If you're feeling overwhelmed by the IELTS reading test and all those different question types, then you've come to the right place. In this video, I'm going to go through each question type individually and then give you some top tips and strategies to complete them effectively. Hi there everyone, and welcome to this IELTS video from Swoosh English. My name is Grace, I am an expert IELTS teacher and academic manager. Now, in the IELTS reading test, there are 14 different types of question that you might encounter, and it is absolutely essential that in your preparation, you practice every single one of them and develop a strategy that you can use to give you the best possible chance of getting as many correct answers as you can. Now, in part one of this video, I am going to be going over the matching and completion style questions. So we're going to split this up and focus first on matching and completion. Let's get started then with our first question type, which is matching headings. In this task, you're going to have a list of headings and you need to match them to a suitable paragraph in the text. Look at this example of a matching headings task. You'll see that our text is labelled with letters for each paragraph, and then we have our list of headings and we're going to match the appropriate heading with each paragraph. Now let's go over a few tips for completing this task effectively. Firstly, make sure you read those instructions carefully so you know how to write your answer. You may have noticed that in the task on the previous slide, the headings were listed and labelled with Roman numerals, and that is how you needed to write your answer on your answer sheet. So please always do read the instructions carefully to make sure you're writing your answer in the correct way. Keep in mind that there are often more headings than you need, so it's quite likely that there will be one or two headings that you don't even use. And you can start this task by identifying keywords in the headings and then match them to information in the paragraphs by searching for those keywords and information. So this is a fairly straightforward task that you should be able to complete relatively quickly by matching those keywords and key information in the headings with the appropriate paragraphs. Moving on to the next task type, which is matching paragraph information. Now in this question type, you're going to have a list of statements that you need to match to an appropriate paragraph in the text, which also contains that information. Let's see an example here. Once again, our text is labelled, each paragraph has a letter, and then we have a list of statements and we're going to match them with the paragraph that contains that information. Let's take a look at some tips for completing this question type. So you should start by reading the statements and think about how they might be paraphrased in the text. So even though we have our list of statements, the information in the text might be written using slightly different words. So it's very important that you know to look out for paraphrasing. Keep in mind that unlike other IELTS reading tasks, the answers to this task do not come in order. So you'll need to be moving around the text in order to match the statements with the correct paragraphs. And also you should start with the easiest questions, as this will help to eliminate the other ones as you're working through. Now this in general is quite a good piece of advice to keep in mind for the IELTS reading test. If you come across a difficult question or you identify questions that are easier that you know you can complete, start with those for these types of tasks, as then you can eliminate answers as you go, and it will really help you when you're down to the last few statements that you need to match. So starting with the easiest ones as you move through can be a really good strategy. Our next question type in the matching category is matching features. So this time you'll be matching features or statements to items in a list based on your reading of the text. So you can see with this example question here, we've got our lists of features 1 to 3, and then our list of layers A to D. So it's a little bit similar to the previous question type, but instead of matching these statements to paragraphs, you're matching them to specific items in a list. Now let's take a look at some tips for this task. Now keep in mind that you might need to use the same option more than once, so you might have 1 or 2 statements that match to the same option in the list, and that is totally fine. Keep in mind that once again, the statements do not come in order. And also your answer will need to be a letter, but make sure you don't mix this up with the letters of the paragraphs. So you're matching the statements to the letters that correspond to the items in the list. You're not matching it to paragraphs. So do read your instructions carefully to make sure you know exactly what you're doing. Now moving on to the next matching task, which is matching sentence endings. Now this is slightly different because this time you're going to have a list of incomplete sentences with another list of appropriate sentence endings, and you're going to match them based on the information in the text. Now this one can be quite daunting, but don't worry. Let's take a look at an example. Now you can see here that you've got 3 sentence halves and then you have 6 possible endings. So you're going to be reading the text and based on the information in the text, matching these sentence halves to make complete sentences. So what are some strategies that you can use or things to keep in mind? Firstly, it can be really helpful to predict how each sentence might end before you even look at the endings. So this can really help you, especially if you've already read the text for a previous question type. You might already have an idea of how the sentence might end. Keep in mind that there will be more endings than you need. And it's really important that you're not just matching words, okay? So you're focusing on the meaning of the sentence and make sure that the sentence that you create matches the information presented in the text. Try to think of synonyms and paraphrasing. Now you'll notice that this is a recurring theme in IELTS reading. You've always got to keep in mind that the sentences or statements or questions that you're reading might be worded in a slightly different way in the text. So in order to be able to identify the correct answers, it is important that you're aware of how things might be paraphrased, how there might be use of synonyms, and looking out for this in the text when you're searching for the answers. Moving on then to the next type of questions, which are completion questions. So the first one we have is sentence completion. This is a pretty straightforward gap fill exercise. You're going to complete sentences about the text by writing the missing words. So you'll see in the instructions here, it will always tell you how many words you can write. You're taking those words directly from the text and you're inserting them into the gaps in these sentences. Now, similarly to sentence completion questions, you also have summary completion. It is quite similar. The only difference is that this time you're completing an entire summary of the text by writing the missing words. Once again, the instructions will tell you how many words you can write. You're taking them from the text and you're putting them into this summary here. Now, some tips to keep in mind for both sentence and summary completion. Perhaps the most important thing of all is to check the instructions for how many words you can write. If you write more words than the instructions indicate, you will not get the point. So please do make sure that the very first thing you do in any IELTS reading task, for that matter, is to check the instructions. Next, help yourself out by predicting the type of word needed for each gap. Look at the gap and think, okay, does this need to be a noun, a verb, an adjective, for example, as this can really help you when you're searching for the correct answer. And also, once you've selected an answer, make sure it's grammatically correct. So it's not enough to just choose a word that you think is correct from the text, putting it in the gap and moving on. Finish that by reading the sentence and checking that it is definitely grammatically correct. Next, we're staying on the topic of completion questions, moving on to this type of question, which is table completion. In this question, you will see a table and there will be some missing information. You need to complete the blanks with appropriate information from the text. So it might look something like this. You can see, once again, we're being told exactly how many words that you can write. And you can see that the gaps are numbered within the table. So it's still completing missing information, but instead of being presented to you in sentences, we're filling in words in a table. The next type we have is flowchart completion. This time you'll see a flowchart with missing information, and you'll be completing those blanks again with appropriate information from the text. A flowchart completion question might look something like this. You can see that in this particular question, our flowchart is describing the life cycle of sea turtles. So it's describing a process. And you're going to go through each of these stages, completing the missing words, and of course, looking in the instructions to see how many words you can write. So tips for table completion and flowchart completion. Once again, very important to check the instructions for how many words you can write. And again, you can also predict the type of word needed for each gap based on the words in the sentence or the words in the table. Again, you should also make sure your answers are grammatically correct when you are doing the flowchart completion. This probably won't be so relevant to the table, but make sure the words that you're writing in those gaps actually make sense. And also, when you've got a table or a flowchart, something you can do is to use clues such as headings or any words that you see in bold to help you understand what information you need. So spending some time studying the table or briefly looking over the flowchart can really help you know what information you're looking for and then assist you in locating those answers in the text. Moving on then to our final question type for this part of the video, we're looking at diagram completion. Once again, you've got a diagram with missing information and you're going to complete it again with information from the text. This example here, you can see our diagram is of the layers of a tropical rainforest and you're going to label the layers. Now, some tips to help you with diagram labeling. Once again, I'm going to say it because it's so important. Check the instructions for how many words you can write and also start by briefly studying the diagram just to understand what it's showing. Again, you can predict the type of word needed, and then I'm going to end with my last piece of advice, which is actually relevant to the entire IELTS test. Check your spelling carefully. Whenever you are writing your answer, make sure that it's spelt correctly, and if appropriate, it's grammatically correct if you're doing sentence completion, because if you make any kind of spelling mistakes, you will not get the mark. So please do make sure that you check your spellings very, very carefully. So that's it for part 1 of this video, in which we've covered matching and completion questions for the IELTS reading test. In part 2, I will be covering the rest of the question types, including everyone's favourite, true, false, not given, as well as multiple choice, choosing from a list of options, short answer questions, and more. So please do stay tuned for the second instalment of this video, in which we're going to help you understand the rest of the IELTS reading types and give you lots of tips and advice to help you complete them. Now, in the meantime, if you're looking for some expert help and support, why not sign up for an IELTS preparation course with Swoosh English? We offer mock exams, live classes, video courses, and so much more. And the best thing is, if you come to our live classes, our expert teachers will go through all of these question types in much more detail than I can in this video. You'll do plenty of practice, you'll get feedback, you'll get to know all of the strategies for each question type. So if you're currently preparing for the IELTS reading test and feeling a little bit overwhelmed, head on over to our website www.swooshenglish.com and see how we can help you become more confident and get the highest possible grade in your IELTS exam. Thanks so much for joining me, everybody. I will see you very soon for part 2. Happy studying, everybody.